hunter in shadow. Nitwerd Hall's towers clawed at the storm-dark sky. Far over the marches lightning struck, igniting some distant fire. To the north, the horizon glowed faintly where the void shields of the storm-weird towers shimmered against the rain. Out at sea, the Geofon heaved, waves rising higher than hab-blocks and breaking in thunder against the rocks. The waters shone ghost green. The gaslioma blooms churned to the surface by the storm, spilling their spores like drifting stars. Far off, the running lights of an Acer ship hugged the flooded coast, its pilot skirting the sea's fury by hiding behind the marshes. Above it, a green orb blossomed soundlessly in the clouds, a distress flare. Octavia Nyssa saw it and smiled. Rain streamed down her face, plastering her hair against her cheeks as she clung to the basalt face of Nitwerd Hall. A distraction. Good. Below her, the wreck of the little raft she had used to reach the fortress was already gone, smashed to splinters. This citadel of the Void Revenants was said to be impregnable, its masters fierce and joyless barbarians. The Assassinorum schematics had been taken long ago from Iron Hand's archives, but those plans were worthless now. Nitwerd Hall had been remade, 4 towers where once there was one, gunports in places no map had shown. A fortress grown like bone around an old wound. She dug in a crampon and hauled herself another level, careful to pass beneath the yawning shadow of a heavy bolter slit. The Suthawerdas, the local intelligence service, had proved impossible to penetrate. No bribes, no disguises. On Nitwertha, every clan knew every other's secrets, and an off-worlder stood out like a corpse in a feast hall. That left only insertion. Her approach had been crude. From Fiskballa station, she had slipped onto a worker's shuttle and disembarked at Fiskport, a stinking, sea-choked town. From there, she hitched rides with strangers, even perching atop a lumbering agri-titan. The locals had pointed her to the monastery readily enough, proud of the mountain crowned with steel. At the bridge, she had found no way forward. The halfway tower bristled with too many guns. So she had stolen a boat and rowed across the green waves instead. The storm had risen swiftly, and by the time she reached the base of the walls, the sea was trying to crush her. Only the madness of an assassin or the desperation of her masters would attempt such a climb. Now she ascended into driving rain, her breath raw in her lungs, her muscles aching. She did not even know which of the towers held her target. All she knew was that the officio had decreed the chapter master of the Void Revenants must die. Why? She could only guess. Perhaps it was his dealings with the Council on Sarathar, perhaps something darker. It did not matter. The Officio Assassinorum had many masters, and Octavia Nyssa served them all. Octavia reached the first window. It was sealed. Transparent steel shutters drawn tight against the storm. She unspooled a length of monomolecular view cord and pressed its head to the seam, the image resolving in her retinal lens. A tall man sat within, skin ashen, features severe beneath a thin crest of gray hair. He wore a high-collared yellow tunic, the insignia of an imperial admiral glittering at his breast. A servo skull hovered above him, its lumen casting pale light across the desk where he scratched with an actual quill on parchment. Not a local, not a chapter master. Someone important, but not her prey. She climbed higher. The next window showed a chamber lit with silks and lamplight. A woman stood with hand on chin, head tilted in thought. 3 attendants knelt before her, each holding up a different gown. She dismissed one with an irritable wave, her eyes narrowing at the remaining 2, as though the fate of empires depended on her choice. Octavia lingered only long enough to etch the image in her memory, then continued her ascent. Above, heavy engine noise filled the air. Massive guns spun up with a groan of servos, their barrels tracking towards the sea. From the highest tower, a thunderhawk launched, sluggish and deliberate in the rain, banking towards the flaring distress beacon far offshore. Octavia smiled faintly, a distraction, and perhaps an opportunity. She moved upward again, body pressed flat as she edged past an auspex blister. A manned gun platform loomed above, its shield plate streaked with rain. Voices carried down, crewmen speaking in their clipped dialect about the far-off emergency, while a robed priest murmured a prayer for those adrift on the waters. Octavia froze, timed her motion with the thunder, then slid unseen along the shadow of the battlements. At last she reached the landing platform. 2 thunderhawks rested there, one already powering down, lashed in place against the gale, the other empty, its hatch left open. The storm howled across the deck, tearing at tarpaulins and chains. Two chapter serfs in flight gear trotted past her, struggling to haul canvas free of the second gunship. Their attention was fixed on the machine, not the shadows. They never saw the figure in black slip between them, vanishing through the yawning hatch into the inner tower. She was inside. For a few heartbeats the landing pad lay still, empty but for the howl of the wind and the flapping of torn sheets. Then a shadow shifted. A darker shape detached itself from the gloom between two thunderhawks, armor plates drinking the stormlight, eyes like cold embers beneath the helm. Captain Horowolf stepped forward. At his battle sign, two shapes peeled out of the black, scouts of the 10th, silent as carrion crows, their camo cloaks streaming in the gale. They moved without word, slipping to either side of the hangar doors, securing them with a predator's patience. Horowolf advanced after the intruder, no hurry in his stride. The assassin had passed unseen through the storm and into the fortress. But the hunter knew, and in Nitwerd Hall, shadows did not belong to her. She slipped deeper into Nitwerd Hall. The interior was not what she expected. Great hearth fires burned in wide stone grates, their smoke venting through iron flues cut into the walls. The scent of wet hounds hung thick in the air, stronger than the tang of machine oil. Somewhere in the depths, a cyber mastiff gave a low, keening wail. Two men passed by, their boots leaving damp prints across the flagstones. Octavia pressed herself into the shadows of a carved buttress, scarcely daring to breathe. Their voices echoed in the vaulted corridor. 3 of the motive force oars have failed. The Asher ships grounded out in the outer fields, near drowned in the sea. Abandoning it? No. An ironclad's coming up from Broadmouthie Port, but in this storm it'll take hours. Captain Sinwolf's already leading a repair crew. Lucky runesmith Torhern's here. They say he's worked flooded engines before. Their voices faded. Octavia waited, then ghosted out, moving downwards. She passed chambers hung with woven banners and tapestries, civilians seated at long trestles, eating plain food by firelight. No weapons, no warriors, wrong tower. Her pulse quickened. She turned back, slipping onto an exposed bridge that spanned to the next tower. Rain lashed against her mask as she crouched low, pulling a jamming field across her Auspex signature. A servo drone whined past overhead, scanning. She waited until its beam swept wide, then darted across, vanishing into the next doorway. Unseen beneath, Captain Horowolf was climbing. He scaled the underside of the bridge with the slow certainty of a predator, following the spoor of his prey. High above, half lost in the curtain of storm, a sniper lay prone across a parapet. His long-barreled rifle rested on the crenellations, eyes unblinking through the scope. He watched the assassin slip inside, then gave a double click across the Vox. A double click answered. The sniper detached his grapple line, fastened it to the tower strut, and swung across the gulf into the storm, vanishing into the rain. She entered the great hall of the Void Revenants. The air was colder here, lit only by braziers that guttered red light up the stone ribs of the tower. The echoes of low-voiced hymns carried from some deeper chamber below, a droning prayer half machine, half psalm. Everywhere she looked she saw the bones of another age. Iron Hand's insignia carved into lintels, etched into pillars, stamped into old banners. They had not erased their origin. Armor and weapons lined the walls, some relics hammered into displays, others in racks ready for use. Great oaths, carved in Benharic script, spiraled up the blackened stone. She passed a pair of warriors in white armor, Hearthguard, broad as bastions, halberds in hand, their helms turning fractionally as she crossed the chamber's edge. They flanked a door barred with iron. She did not linger. A direct approach would be suicide, and she knew better than to test the patience of giants. Every chamber had more than one way in. She found a side door hidden in shadow, a servant's path that descended into narrow servitor tunnels. Here the rustic mask of fortress and feasting hall fell away. The walls were metal, thrumming with cable conduits, lumen strips burning cold instead of firebrands. The tang of ozone replaced wood smoke. She found a hatch and slipped through. The chamber beyond was dim, its only light filtering through a single high-rose window. It was a prayer chapel, private, solemn. The place smelled of oils and dust, Around the walls, armor was fixed to mechanical arms, ready to be lowered and fitted at a moment's notice. One relic caught her eye, a crystalline pistol resting on a stand, alien and beautiful. She leaned closer, only to disturb a layer of dust revealing the faint shimmer of monofilament webs strung around it. The trap was elegant and absolute. If she had reached for it, her hand would already be cut fine enough for broth. She slipped past heavy curtains into the next chamber. There, seated on a broad chair draped with furs, was a man. His head was bent over piles of parchment and data slates, the scratch of a quill faint against the storm outside. A single inkpot rested on the table beside him. Octavia's lips curled into a smile. Silent as breath, she drew the dart pistol, its needle loaded with a toxin brewed to fell even Astartes, to overpower the post-human physiology that had defied poison since the days of old night. All too easy. She imagined the next steps already, a stolen gunship, a descent to the storm-racked platform, lost among the repair crews. They would never find her. From there, off-world and back to Imperial space. Her grin widened as her finger tightened on the trigger. "Oh, do put that thing down," the man murmured, dipping his quill. His voice was calm, almost bored, as if addressing a child. Octavia did not hesitate. The dart gun's whisper crack spat a poisoned flechette across the chamber. It flared as it cut through the air, piercing the shimmer of a refractor field, only to be snatched mid-flight by a whiplash of segmented steel. A mechadendrite sprung from nowhere. The image of the chapter master flickered, pixel light dissolving into static. The furs, the desk, the man, all revealed as a hollow simulacrum. In its place sat a robed figure of rust red, a face of brass and augmetic eyes glowing green. Archmagos Pyrovox set the quill aside with mechanical precision. She actually took the shot. His Vox grill crackled amusement as he turned toward the corner. From the shadows stepped the real chapter master. Arms folded across his chest, teeth bared in a grin, Beornwulf Elfwine looked more wolf than man. "I told you she would," Pyrovox said smugly. "I suggest you remain very, very still. Bolt-caliber weapons are not kind to your kind of physiology." Octavia felt cold ceramite press against the side of her throat, the quiet snarl of a bolt pistol's machine spirit. She glanced back. Captain Hjorwulf stood behind her, helm hooded, his free hand outstretched. "Hand it over," he said. She moved slow, eyes flat. Then she dropped the pistol, only to knock it aside mid-fall, her other hand flashing. The knife bit deep into Hjorwulf's palm. Poison burned across his augmetic flesh as she twisted away, already darting for the window. A needle pistol appeared in her grip as if conjured, its venom rounds streaking toward the chapter master. Beornwulf sidestepped, cloak flaring, drawing his own bolt pistol in one smooth movement. The assassin anticipated it, flinging a hook-fang blade at him, a monofilament line unspooling with a hiss. The throw would have been perfect, until Hjorwulf's hand clamped her cloak and yanked. She shed it instantly, slipping free like a serpent. The hook-fang glanced off Beornwulf's bracer and buried itself in the wall, the line writhing like a snake. Venom hissed and ate into the stone, leaving it weeping black ichor. Unperturbed, Octavia rolled to her feet. Her executioner pistol rose in a blur. The melt-around vaporized stone where Beornwulf had stood a heartbeat before. His answering bolt round reduced an ancient vase to powder. Then he was there, too close. His hand closed around her wrist, bone and weapon alike crushed in his grip. The executioner clattered to the floor. Pain flared up her arm. She snarled, ignoring it, drawing a short, humming power sword with her other hand. But before she could strike, Hjorwulf's arms locked her from behind. One gauntlet ripped the blade from her grasp, the other wrapped across her throat. His augmetic fingers flexed, revealing the hidden injector blade built into his palm. Its tip scratched the skin of her neck, a kiss of death. She froze. Even an assassin knew when a move was final. Pyrovox's metallic laughter filled the chamber. He clapped his mechadendrites together, the sound like chimes of steel. "Well done. I said she would try anyway. I win the wager." Beornwulf, grim-faced, tossed him a leather pouch heavy with coin. Hjorwulf shoved her down into the chair. Octavia's wrists were bound to its iron arms, the bruised ache of her crushed hand throbbing with every heartbeat. He stood back, helm shadowing his face, bolt pistol still loose in his grip. The chamber was quiet, save for the crackle of the braziers. The door creaked open. Bergwijn leaned in, the bulk of his white armor filling the threshold. His visor lenses flicked from Octavia to Hyorwolf, then to the dart-pocked wall. He gave a long, theatrical tutting sound. "Caught yourself a mouse," he rumbled, almost disappointed. Then, without another word, he swung the door shut again. Octavia clenched her jaw, the cold taste of porcelain against her teeth. She bit down hard. Nothing. Her eyes widened. She tried again, this time pressing her tongue against the wafer-sized grenade hidden beneath the molar. A tongue switch click, a prayer in High Gothic, nothing. No fire, no release. Panting, she sagged against the chair restraints, her breath steaming in the cold air. "I will never speak," she hissed, defiant but shaking. Pyrovox's Vox grill chuckled, a metallic stutter that set her nerves on edge. "Oh, everyone talks, my dear. But you are fortunate. Here on Neatwertha, people love to talk. They will talk for hours. Mostly about the rain, it is true, but still, endless talking." His tone dropped, Vox crackling into something darker, something that reeked of iron and circuits. "Now, if you were on Incaloris, you would talk. Everyone does when the flesh is cut from the soul." He paused, then brightened, almost cheerful. "But I don't think there is anything you have to say anyway." Bjornwolf lowered himself into the opposite chair, the fur cloak falling heavy about his shoulders. He leaned on the armrest, watching her with a grin far too calm for a man who had just been shot at. "We knew there would be moves against the chapter," he said evenly. "From every direction. Factions in the Reach, factions in the Imperium, all gnawing." Pyrovox clattered his mechadendrites together, siding with the Council when it suited them. Siding with the Imperium when Novaterrans pressed the leash, not giving the eclipse of destiny to Mars, blowing apart a third of Manifold Dawn's fleet. "And taking 20 worlds," Bornwolf added, tone still almost conversational. Pyrovox nodded. "Yes, there are many reasons, or simply the sin of existing. I myself considered it once. Thought perhaps Nitwertha's forge had grown, too friendly with grimness. Decided perhaps it was easier to kill Archmagos Sensorax Centauri, cut out the middleman." Bornwolf turned his head, gaze hardening slightly. Pyrovox's mechadendrites lifted in mock surrender. "Just a joke," the Magos rasped, the Vox clicking in laughter. "I only thought about it anyway." Octavia's mind reeled. This was not how interrogations worked. She should have been screaming under pain needles by now, not listening to her would-be victims banter like long-suffering comrades. And why was the chapter master smiling? She had just tried to kill him. He leaned forward suddenly, grin wolf-wide. "So I thought the best way to find out who wanted me dead was to hire someone to kill me." Pyrovox's Vox grill screeched in laughter. "Yes! He hired you to kill himself!" Hyorwolf, silent until now, stepped from the wall. "We paid 5 assassins, through various channels. All failed." He gestured to Octavia. "Except you." "All 6, Pyrovox corrected with glee. Hyorwolf gave a curt nod. "We never did learn who hired the last one." Octavia's blood went cold. She had come to kill the chapter master of the Void Revenants, and instead discovered she was the bait in someone else's game. "As it turns out," said Archmagos Pyrovox, servo skull bobbing overhead, "you are the only one to make it into the chamber. Congratulations." Octavia did not feel she had won anything. The Magos Vox crackled with dry amusement as his mechadendrites twitched. "One of your rivals tried climbing under the bridge. We found him in pieces on the rocks. Another came in by shuttle, did not make it past the void shields. Another tried the sewers." Pyrovox paused, eyes narrowing with mock solemnity. "Best not talk about that one. Took us a day to scrape what was left off the gratings." Bornwolf grimaced, shaking his head. Pyrovox continued with relish. "Then there was the one who came hidden in a weapons shipment. Didn't know we sort munitions by caliber. What we found was very small indeed. And the woman who thought to stow aboard a refueling barge, pity. She learned too late that Prometheum tanks lie under the waterline." Bornwolf leaned forward, grinning wolfishly. "Then there is you, mad enough to climb the sea walls in a storm. I'll give you that." He turned to Hurrowolf. "Best tell Tiberius we'll need some defenses at sea level. Nothing fancy, just something to keep the fish off." Octavia shuddered but kept her face hard. She would not give them the satisfaction. Bornwolf settled back, expression easy. "So, Thanks to the deal we made with your employer, we already know who truly ordered this little game. They will be dealt with shortly. But that, he leaned forward, eyes glinting, is not your concern. Octavia waited. Her heartbeat slowed. She had seen death before, delivered it many times, and was under no illusions. She doubted these warriors of Nitwertha cared for drawn-out executions or public spectacle. A swift fall from the battlements, perhaps, or a blade between the shoulders. Either way, she was ready. She would die as she had lived, with the honor of her office silent and unbroken. Bornwolf leaned back in his chair, firelight glinting off his teeth as his grin spread wide. We need a task done. With all eyes on us, we cannot be seen to do it ourselves, or have anyone else take the blame. That, assassin, sounds very much like a job for one of your kind. Octavia's brow furrowed. There is someone you want me to eliminate? She asked, cautious. Pyrovox's mechadendrites clicked and swayed, his vox grill purring with artificial cheer. Of course, refusal is always an option. We'll be delighted to send you back to Terra on the next outbound vessel. First class, naturally. All expenses paid, under your own name, no less. Octavia's eyes narrowed. The Mago's mirth buzzed in the air like static. You wouldn't want the Officio Assassinorum to overlook your triumphant return, would you? Her mouth was dry. She realized they were mocking her, yet deadly serious. To be sent home so openly would be as final as a bolt round to the skull. She had little choice. She straightened, jaw tight. Who do you want me to kill? Bjornwolf leaned forward, grin wolfish and terrible. We don't want you to kill anyone. We want you to dig. Think of it as a genealogy expedition, a little hunting through the sand, in a place better suited to your talents. If you succeed, I expect the Officio Assassinorum would greet you with a fanfare, or whatever they do in those dark halls. She looked from one to the other, the wolfish Astartes, the watchful captain, the grinning Magos. To her surprise, they were sincere. Pyrovox's eyes gleamed emerald. If I were you, I would take the first option. At least then you can face your end with certainty. Octavia Nissa sat up straighter, her voice steady. What is your mission, Chapter Master? Bjornwolf nodded slowly, smile curling like a blade. Welcome to the Sothawerdas. Merchant Prince Hālgengas strolled up the ramp of the shuttle, with the swagger of a man convinced of his own importance. His robes were cut from the finest silks of Castell, though travel-stained, and his signet rings clinked as he adjusted them absently. The cabin smelled of worn leather and machine oil. He dropped heavily into one of the cracked seats, tugging the straps across his chest with irritation. It was beneath him, this grubby little planetary shuttle, but soon enough he would be back aboard his personal liner, and from there to Castell. The thought made him smile. There were deals waiting for him, promising ones. His influence had grown steadily in the Reach, and he had a new trade route in the works with the Forges of Grimness. Profits would be staggering. Already the ledger was fat with promise, and no one back home suspected what he truly intended. It would surprise them all. The shuttle's doors hissed, cutting off his reverie. A sudden wave of smell washed over him, oil, incense, and beneath it, the cloying sweetness of cheap perfume. The hairs rose on the back of his neck. Hālgengas kept his gaze low, staring at the deck as the sound of heels tapped against the floor. Red leather boots polished to a shine came into his view. He dared to look up. Seated across from him was a woman, or something close enough to pass for one. She wore the crimson robes of a tech priest, yet her face was smooth, unnervingly human. Only the faint seam lines beneath her eyes and the too perfect curve of her lips betrayed the mask. Archmagos Damia Voratrix smiled at him. Prince Hālgengas, she said softly, voice like velvet drawn across razors. So good to meet you again. I hear you are doing great things with your forge of late. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. Business is good. The smile widened, stretching further than it should have, teeth glinting faintly in the gloom. The Void Revenants, she murmured, intercepted an assassin. He stiffened, tried to feign ignorance. Before he could speak further, 8 mechadendrites snapped into motion, hissing from beneath her robes like serpents of metal. They struck the bulkheads and deck around him with the sound of gunfire, clang, 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 closing in from every side. One hovered just shy of his throat, another at his groin, another poised like a viper before his eye. Pinned, unmoving, Hālgengas dared not even breathe. Voratrix leaned forward, her false flesh mask shifting strangely with the movement. Her voice was honeyed menace. "You threaten my forge again, Prince," she whispered, "and Castel will not merely need a new merchant prince. It will need a new city guard, a new council, a new everything, for it will be under Void Revenant protection." Her grin broadened, and the metal limbs pressed closer, a breath from piercing his flesh. Harrigan forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I understand." Voratrix leaned back, the dendrite snapping back into her robes with whip-crack precision. She smoothed her crimson sleeves with dainty, flesh-covered hands that were too perfect, their motion just a fraction out of time with true human grace. "Good," she said pleasantly. "I thought you might." The shuttle jolted into the sky, carrying them both upward, though Harrigan had never felt so utterly trapped. Voratrix's smile never faltered, though the mechadendrites coiled tighter, their sharpened tips flexing in anticipation. "Now," she purred, voice low and silken, "what have you been getting up to on your tiny little forge world? It has been very quiet of late, suspiciously quiet, and suddenly you are shifting a great deal of metal, vast shipments unaccounted. Now, what could that be for?" Harrigan stammered, his rings clicking nervously against one another as his hands fidgeted. Sweat broke across his brow. Just upgrading our security, that's all. Nothing unusual." The Archmagos tilted her head. The motion was too smooth, too artificial, like a machine mimicking humanity without quite understanding it. Outside, the shuttle engines howled, rising in pitch as the craft lifted from its pad. The world beyond the viewport blurred in sheets of rain. Forks of lightning cracked across the storm front, briefly illuminating the black teeth of Nitweird Hall's towers far below. "Security," she repeated softly, Vox grill humming with static. "Yes, let us hope, Prince, that is all it is." The shuttle climbed higher, its engines clawing into the storm like a beast desperate to escape the sea's fury. The Welsiacs powered out of the system. Helmsman Fear's voice cut through the dim, incense-laden air of the command deck. "Ship clear of Geofon Brick Station, out of Thermendegaet's gravity well, engines steady, ready for translation." The words carried the weight of finality. The bridge crew shifted uneasily, as if the declaration itself invited misfortune. Vox Officer Garspec pressed his brass augmetic tight to his ear, lips moving as he traced the streaming Binharic across his console. He raised one gauntleted hand in salute. "We are cleared for translation, Lord." Sigibald sat back in the command throne, its throne cables linking into the sockets along his spine with a hiss. He rested one hand on the hilt of Tempest's bite, fingers tracing the engraved runes along its crossguard. The familiar weight steadied him. Commanding a battleship had been too auspicious, too exposed. He had always preferred the cloak of a diminutive destroyer, unnoticed in the shadow of greater hulls, a blade in the dark, rather than a crown jewel. "Astropath Aylward," he said, his voice carrying across the vaulted bridge. The astropath rose from his dais, the iron bindings around his eyes glimmering with warding runes. His staff clanged once against the deck, a sharp sound that reverberated through the steel bones of the ship. He inclined his head, sightless eyes fixed on the void. "The path is clear." Sigibald nodded and opened the Vox link to the navigator's sphere, a massive bronze reliquary sealed deep within the ship's spine. His words echoed like ritual. "Set course to the Forge World Sarathar. Translate at your discretion." A low moan shuddered through the hull as the great brute force engines wound down, their steady thrum falling into silence. In their place came the chanting of the engine seers, their litanies of ignition rising as Engineer Regnia's hands moved across sanctified controls. Wards hissed into life, the Geller Field building like the tolling of a distant bell. The smell of hot oil and sanctified incense thickened as sensors swung on chains, filling the air with acrid smoke. Behind them, Warrant Officer Dornstall leaned against the bulkhead, bolt pistol holstered at his thigh, flask in his other hand. He took a slow drink, grimacing at the bitter tang of recycled amasec. Warp travel always soured his stomach. He cast his eye across the bridge crew, Captain Mandalik, standing stiff, his face shadowed. The captain was returning home, but without his ship, the Tenebris Lex. To Dornstall's mind, a captain without a vessel was nothing but a displaced officer, a desk clerk waiting for reassignment. Mandalic sadness weighed heavier than the storm outside. Lexmec Ranjan, his augmetic fingers twitching with anticipation, eyes bright as he murmured calculations. Ranjan loved this part, the endless strings of encryption, of battle codes hidden in void logic. To him, the warp was a puzzle to be solved. And the newest recruit, Octavia Nyssa. Dornstall let his eyes linger on her a moment longer than necessary. General Tiberius himself had recommended her, a native of the Inclusium colonies. Skilled in tracking and encryption, the word was she had the instincts of a hunter. She fastened the strap of her Lexmec uniform jacket, tugging awkwardly at the silver flask that hung at her belt. She smoothed the cloth and nodded to him with a smile. He nodded back, though grimly. He wondered if she knew what awaited her on Sarathar. Why would anyone ever volunteer to transfer there? Still, they needed more recruits. For her part, Octavia Nyssa kept her face calm, but the thought gnawed at her. Perhaps she should have taken the luxury voyage back to Terra, bounty and all. At least it would have been quick. This was stepping into the maw of eternity. The lights dimmed, klaxons sounded, deep and resonant, echoing like the toll of cathedral bells. Across the bridge, dozens of crew made the sign of the Aquila, some whispering their last confessions. At the navigator's sphere, the wards screamed as they flared into life, bathing the bridge in cold, unholy light. "Translation in the Emperor's name," Sigibild intoned. Reality bent. The Walsiak shuddered like a dying beast as the warp tore it from the fabric of stars.